let us jump into our game review. We are reviewing Field of Arle. It is a 2014 game by Uwe Rosenberg, the master. The art is done by the always exceptional Dennis Lohausen, and the publisher in the United States is Z-Man Games. Ben, tell us, what is this amazing kind of, well, the initial game, two-player Uwe Rosenberg game? And tell us about it.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you about it. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about why I was drawn to it for this week's episode.
Please.
This is a game I actually purchased it. I guess maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. I was in Toronto, and Toronto has amazing board game shops. And I saw it on the shelf, and I had seen online on Board Game Geek. I had seen on various blog posts people playing Fields of Arle, and I know people are really into it. And I always saw these cute, adorable sheep and cows. And the box is just like this beautiful blue box with like a sky, and there's like a windmill, and it's just like, I was like, I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna get this big chunky box. I guess that's my thing. I get giant board games when I'm not at home, and so I'm like, let me use up all of my luggage.
Treat yourself.
So, yeah. So I got it, and even though it was only 1 to 2 players, I still thought it would be good to have like a really fun big two-player only option. At this point, it was before the expansion Tea and Trade came out, which we'll be talking about too. And basically, Fields of Arle is like, I kind of feel like it's the ultimate farming game. You know, Uwe Rosenberg, you know, he's famous for Agricola, Feast for Odin, all these farming games. And this one it's actually really easy to explain. You are just building a giant farm, and you have player boards, and the game is all about like how you're going to build your farm. You can grow fields. You can grow flax field. You can grow wheat field. You can build a forest. You can turn your forest into a park. You can put in some stalls, that way your animals can mate. You can upgrade those stalls to stables, so even more animals can mate. You can maybe turn them into double stalls. You can build buildings that will give you, in most cases, a really strong immediate action. Sometimes you'll get an ongoing power from the buildings. You can you can slaughter your animals to get food. You can slaughter your animals to get hides that you can turn into leather.
So a real departure for Uwe Rosenberg.
A real departure. The other thing is that this takes place in Arle, which is, I think, where he is from. And so a lot of times this game is referred to as a very autobiographical game, as much as a board game can be autobiographical. But a lot of like his life is apparently reflected in this game. And so there's also your field, your whole farm area. They're bogs, they're moors. And so one thing that you can also do in the game, and that you're encouraged to do, is to drain the moors, so that way they can become workable pieces of land. And then when you drain the moors, then you can actually get peat, and you use peat as a resource. There's like about 1 million resources in this game.
Yeah.
And you buy vehicles,
which is weird, because Elder doesn't love this game. How does he not
Elder
love this
doesn't
game?
love it. It's
with so many resources.
There are only actually like 6 resources, right?
There's
it feels a lot because you're manipulating it all the time, but there are only actually 6.
No, because then there are also the tiles. So the tile resources are different.
Yeah,
so I think
there's like a fine
12.
line, right? Because there's like the resources like wood and clay and peat, which are sort of like your building block resources. But then you have goods, and then you have goods tracked. There's just like 1 million things that you can like basically track and gather and use. You can get vehicles, and with the vehicles, you can upgrade those very resources, or you can go traveling. And when you go traveling, you can get food out of it, and then you get to go up this traveling path. There's literally 1,000 different directions. But here, what I'm going to do now is tell you about what sort of makes this unique, like a unique farming game. The main thing is that the game takes place over 4.5 years. And it's sort of like there's like a winter season and a summer season, more or less. And in the winter season, you can only do winter actions. In the summer season, you can only do summer actions. And one thing, though, is that once per round, someone can do an action that's out of season. And when they do that, they potentially forfeit being starting player the next round. So there's like a little bit of brinksmanship of like when you're going to do that, if you're going to do that, if you're going to give up your starting player, and that as well. There's also a lot of the actions are linked to various tracks, and those tracks will determine the power of that action. So, for instance, if I wanted to gather wood, if I were at sort of the starting point on that track, I go there, I can gather 3 pieces of wood. But as I improve on that track, I can go to that action spot and gather 6 pieces of wood. So that's another way that the game is sort of unique. And I think like I think those are like the 2 major things that make the game unique, and then the rest is just like about how you manage your animals, how you manage your board. There's dikes that you also have to like, build. You're sort of expanding, pushing back the water line, things like that. Tom, are there elements you feel like I'm sort of missing here? I'm just trying to give like a high level.
I think you covered it pretty well. Let's put it in context of the other games like this by Uwe. In comparison to Agricola, this has no cards, so there is no hand of cards that anybody has. What you see is what you get on the board. There are more action spaces per player by a large amount, so there are many more places, which means there's less player blocking that goes on in the game. Matter of fact, most of the major actions have so many like building a building. There's I think 3 spaces on the winter and the summer side of the board that you can take that action or something along those lines. So
there's like 3 on the yeah.
It's not easy.
There's
It's not easy to block a person in this game. Much like Ora and Labora, you can purchase extra land so that you can put more things out. In this case, there's a dike system where you are basically drying out the land. You're moving the dikes further and further out to get more land. You have peat bogs that you have to dry out to turn into peat and then free that up for land once you've taken the peat out. So it creates something like that. And also like Ora and Labora, a lot of the game is about gaining resources and then upgrading them to their better for. So taking lumber and or taking wood and turning it into lumber, taking clay and turning it into bricks, and so on and so forth. And I guess like Caverna, all of the buildings that are available in the game are out there for you to grab right off the bat, and you can look at it and you can kind of it's good strategically as opposed to tactically, because you can start to put together a plan. You can say, okay, I think probably this building and this building go really well together. I can start to go that way. And then if I see that my opponent has gotten an edge in getting those things, I can come up with a plan B, and I can zig and zag. In that sense, the 2-player aspect of it is very interesting, because there is I think when you're playing well, you're paying attention to what the other person is doing, so you know what resources they're going to be going for and what general strategy they're going to be going for.
There's no hidden information whatsoever.
Correct.
Like, this is actually a game that would be amazing as on Board Game Arena, or Board Game Arena would be great, because again, there are so many resources, and there's no hidden information, which means that you could really have a very robust undo system with the game, which we always like with our online implementations.
Yes, we do.
Because everything, when you start the game, there's a very small amount of randomness at the beginning. Almost all the buildings are going to be the same, except for, I don't know, like a small handful. But that
half?
Being said, that small handful makes a difference.
Yeah, I thought it's half, isn't it? Half of the buildings are fixed and half are random?
I think it's more than half.
Okay, all right.
I don't know. I could be wrong. But either way, there's still like a lot of fixed stuff, and whatever the randomness is, there's like the only randomness in the game are those initial buildings, that the way they get put out, and then everything from that point on, it's just like, here are all the tools for you, and you go ahead and have fun.
When you describe it as an autobiographical game, I just have to laugh. I'm like, oh, in what way? I mean, other than like, I would love it. I would love it if there were the little cardboard chits for the milkmaid or whatever, and then you flip it over, and it's like a little autobiography. It's like, her name was Lotte. She was my first love. She went and slept with Lars instead.
It's funny that you say that, actually, because the game has an expansion called Tea and Trade. And that expansion came it comes with a big old booklet that is nothing but flavor text. There's no rules in it. It's just like, here's what there's like a paragraph for every single action. I've actually, of course, because I'm a terrible person, I didn't read any of it. But like,
oh, come on.
Sometimes people are like, this is funny. Why is there this action? And there is an explanation for everything. So the whole thing, he has actually really put in his his heart into this thing. So I guess that's why people say it's autobiographical. But I know what you're saying. It would be funny if there's actual people from his life that were like on the spots. Like,
the year was 1986. Uncle Lars got trapped in the peat bog and was not discovered for 7 days.
He became a bog man.
That's so great. So talk about Tea and Trade a little bit.
I'm sorry. Oh, so Tea and Trade introduces a few things. First of all, it gives you the potential to play with a third person. It also introduces the idea of tea, and basically tea is a new resource that lets you kind of do certain actions supercharged. When we talked about the actions that have the tracks, you can spend a tea, and then you can do an action. Like if you were going to collect, if you're only entitled to get 3 wood from the woodcutter, let's say, but you spend a tea, you would get like a 4th wood. You sort of do the action as if you were a little higher on the track than you actually are. And then you can upgrade that tea. It's an East Frisian tea. I hope I'm saying that correctly. It might be East Frisian. I'm not sure. But I call it fancy tea. And when you got fancy tea, you can actually basically do an action as if you were too higher up on the track, or perhaps more importantly, you can spend 2 fancy tea to do an action twice. You get like a double shot of that action right there because that tea is so good. It's such good tea.
Ben. Take that.
Yeah.
That's my action. That's what I do.
Yeah. So that's the main thing. And then there's it also introduces a thing where you can build ditches, and ditches they sort of accelerate the process of being able to drain out your bogs, and they allow for more robust sheep breeding, and also they kind of augment a strategy. If you want to grow a lot of flax fields or wheat fields, ditches facilitate that too. It's supposed to be just reading online in the base game, people really felt like the flax and wheat field strategy, because if you do that strategy, what basically happens is that at the end of every year you gain sort of complementary wheat and flax income as it's normally known, and so people feel like that strategy is a little weak in the base game, so the ditches help that up. So and then it also introduces boats, and boats let you get things like tea and other resources.
Yeah, I think the other Uvo game we should mention with regard to this game is Feast for Odin. Feast for Odin has a ton of action spaces, so many action spaces that you can place your Vikings out on. Fields of Arle feels a little bit like that. It's like a slightly lesser version of that. In Feast for Odin, you are placing workers out, and you can place 1, 2, 3, or even 4 workers on a space, and the spaces actually require that number in order to take those more powerful actions. Fields of Arle doesn't have anything like that. It's very simple. You put out you only have 4 workers. You always only have 4 workers, and you put them out, and so you're going to have, in the 9 rounds of the game, you're going to have 36 actions, which is why the double T action, where you get to take the same action twice, is so powerful. As we all know, action economy often in these games is the most important economy, which created an interesting situation in the game that Ben and I played. It was the T was going heavy T seemed to be a very powerful strategy. I haven't played it enough to know if that's going to pan out or if that's easily counterable. Which brings
Tom had a very robust T engine. He created. He used those boats in the expansion, and he had a whole thing like T comes in, T gets upgraded. It was a whole thing, and he just went to town, and he destroyed me by about 50 points or so. Admittedly, I also played a horrific game, and I had a dysfunctional, terrible farm that no one in Arle should be proud of.
Well, yeah. Here's my question for you. Is this game multiplayer solitaire?
Yes.
There are only 2 things that are not multiplayer solitaire about it. One is that if you buy a building, I can't buy that building. And the second thing is if you go on a space, I can't go on that exact space. But the truth is that there is another space you can go to where you pay to food, which is pricey, but not undoable, almost never undoable. Where I can still take that. I could still take that action. There are many spaces for some of the major actions where you can go and do basically the same thing as the building action. There are 3 spaces, 2 spaces where you can do the building action. It starts to feel, in Agricola, the player interaction is I grab the 5 wood, haha, you can't get the 5 wood, right?
Yeah.
It's a good player interaction. That is deep. That is powerful, right? In Le Havre, when you go on a building and you take that action, that building is closed for business and nobody can go there. And the timing of that is heavily competitive in player versus player. There's a lot of that. This game feels. Here's the thing. I have a notorious aversion to multiplayer solitaire. Do not like it. Paladins of the West Kingdom I panned because it is way too multiplayer solitaire for me. And yet I really like Fields of Arle. So how is it that even though it is very multiplayer solitaire, listen, the more spaces that you can go to, right, the less competition there is for any one particular space necessarily, right? Why is it that I still like this game so much, even though if you wanted to do the T-boat strategy, you could have done the exact same strategy as me with relatively no problem. And once I started down the T-boat strategy, there was no way for you to stop me. There was nothing that you could do that would impact me in any way because I am an island to my own. And I don't like that. I don't like that. And yet I still like the game.
So to get back to your original question,
yes.
Is this multiplayer solitaire? I have a very definitive answer for you, which is yes and no. My experience with this game is that it can be multiplayer solitaire very, very easily, and it can also be the exact opposite very easily. And in fact, this is sort of in line with a lot of my experience with this game in general, which is that I actually think it's a very, very deep game, and it's a surprising game in that it has a lot of surprises in it, and it keeps revealing new aspects to it. And so just when you sort of think you have the game figured out, or just when you sort of think you know what you're going to do with it, there's this. Oh, I thought this was a multiplayer solitaire game, but now I'm like deeply like somehow connected to this other player's things that they're doing. And then, but this game I'm actually in my own world. I feel like I'm actually having very different experiences when I play it. Huh. So I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to expand upon that, but I actually also kind of want to hear what Paul has to say about this, because I know Paul gets different things from games than necessarily what we do. And Paul and I were talking about this after one session, and I would love to hear what you think about it, Paul, in terms of multiplayer solitaire.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Let's see. I do like when I think of, say, Agricola, I feel like, and this might be a really esoteric comparison, I feel like it's Tron cycles. Do you remember the movie Tron? Anyone?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone? And
yeah.
You take an action and then it's like a right angle, and then the other person has to adjust immediately or die.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you go to Feast for Odin, I feel like Rosenberg decided to try a different mechanic. Whereas someone will take an action, you can't take that, but you can kind of adjust, just nudge your strategy. And so, because there are so many other good options to take, that nothing, it just changes your overall strategy a little bit. Maybe it only changes it tactically for that round, but in the end, I feel like if you're playing it right, when you're playing this right, it should feel a lot more like wrestling, where there are moves and counter moves that are without the adrenaline, not the adrenaline, the testosterone and just crushingness about it, where you're kind of gently just maybe it's Tai Chi or something, like Tai Chi battle or whatever, where it's this soft kind of flowing with each other, and at the end, someone will win, and it doesn't feel as confrontational, but at the same time you're interacting. Does that make sense? Am I sounding crazy?
It does, and that's sort of what I was getting at, which is that the first time I played this game, so I came back from Toronto, and I was so excited to have this big crazy game, and I opened it up, and I decided to play it solo. And I don't play solo a lot, but I decided to play solo, and I was kind of like, I was like, first of all, there's like a million actions that you can do, and admittedly, like I said, there is like summer actions and winter actions, so you really only have half those actions available at any given moment, but you kind of don't, because you may have the potential to take the other half if the special action hasn't been taken, which is the out of season action. So you sit there and there's just like all these things you could be doing. And in terms of, and I want to get back to that in a moment, but in terms of multiplayer solitaire, so in the beginning, you're just sort of like doing your thing. But this is a game that rewards repeated plays, because the more you play it, the more you have an idea of a path you want to take or what things you know you should be doing. And so the first time I played it, I'm sorry, the way that relates to multiplayer solitaire versus not is that like when you know what you need to be doing and when you know what the other person needs to be doing, all of a sudden you can engage with the game in a much more enmeshed way as opposed to when you're just like dealing with your own farm. Also, last night I actually got to play this 3-player, which I was very, very excited about. I had never gotten to play it 3-player. And whoa, it's not multiplayer solitaire at 3-player. I mean, it sort of is because you got your farm, but wow, it tightens up a lot. And oh God, I kept on getting blocked. And my farm, I actually did the worst I ever did in the game. I had my worst score of all time. My farm was a pathetic, semi-boggy mess by the end because people kept getting in my way. It definitely felt very interactive. And on top of that, the special action changes a lot. Not that much, but when you have 3 people, the special action changes just enough that there is more consideration about like when am I going to do an out of season action that it becomes interactive in that way. So yeah. I think that as you play it more, it does actually become more engaging.
Or maybe just at the higher player count. Because I felt that way when I was playing 2-player. Like I played two player a lot. I own the game, but now that we played it recently and playing with the Tea and Trade expansion, I got this sense that I'm like, wow, you know what? If there was just one more player soaking up some of these spaces, there'd be some harder decisions. So to use Paul's metaphor about the lighter, nudgier interaction, I like a knife fight in a phone booth, right? I like that. Too. I love that. So give me Brass, give me Age of Steam, just Democker, let's go at it. Let's have some fun. While this may not quite be multiplayer solitaire, it ain't a knife fight in a phone booth. This is a tickle fight.
It's not.
This is a tickle fight. That's what this is.
It is. Or maybe it's just like a regular knife fight, which is like not something you want to be in anyway, right? Like, I think I don't like a knife fight in like a regular sized room is still pretty scary to me. Yeah. So like,
this is a tickle fight. At most, all I'm doing is you're gonna move a few feet away from me to get away from the tickle monster, and then you're gonna proceed on your way.
This is a knife fight in an open concept layout, and I think. But that being said, though, so now I'm going to get back to what I talked about with the big. I keep saying this. I'm going to get back to that, but here's what I'm going to get back to now. When I talked about how like there are all this when I first opened up, there's all these spots. Honestly, the first few times I played this game, I was like, yeah, it's cool, but it was missing that urgency, the sharp right turn of the Tron cycle that I would get from Agricola and so many other games. I mean, anyone who plays with me knows that I like to spend half the game going, oh, I'm so stressed. No, that's for some reason like a
I love it,
masochistic pleasure.
Me too.
And this game, the first few times I played it, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't feel a noose tightening around my neck. I was just sort of doing things, right? And I was like, this game's cool, but I don't understand why people are like losing their mind over it online, right? Mm-hmm. But every single time I played this game, I've liked it more and more and more to the point where I think I might be at the point now where I think I love the game. And I don't really, usually if I'm sort of like meh on a game, it usually sort of stays meh. And this game you in the beginning, I feel like I've seen it with every new person who plays this game. Everyone is completely overwhelmed with choices. They don't know what to do, and they don't know how any of this works together. Like, why do I care about hides? Why do I care about wool? And I don't have any answers. I was like, well, because sometimes wool matters and sometimes hides matter. It depends on what you do. It's hard to see how all these pieces all work together. But as you play and you gain experience, you start to have like this awareness that like, I could get some hides. I could start developing hides. And then if I do that, then I could do this, which then means I could do that. And it's like a beautiful mind and things start to come together. Mm-hmm. And then once you start knowing what you can do and knowing how little time there is to do what you need to do, that news suddenly is there and it's tight. And it's like, how did this game just become so tense for me? It used to be such a light, like I'm just building a farm. And I think that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. Oh, sorry, Paul, you go ahead.
I was going to say, like, to me, like, I look at this as the transition between chess and Go, where, like, chess is very much in your face and it can be, it's very punchy. You know, it's very testosterone-y and you're breaking through your game. Whereas Go is a lot more gentle and the strategy is much more subtle. And in this way, like, you know, Go has, you know, you look at the Go board and, you know, it's just nothing, right? It's just a grid, and you're just placing black or white, you know, I guess tokens, and it doesn't look like there is going to be a lot of depth to it. How could there be so much depth for just this grid? But like when you play it, you'll find that, like, you know, the more you understand, the more actual complexity it is. It relieves you of fighting only with you know with your fists, and like requires a more gentler long-term approach, which I feel like, you know, like Feast for Odin and this game, like, you know, it really, there's a push towards that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I being crazy? And I feel like that's probably what you're responding to. Like, you know, there's this sense of like from overwhelming freedom to like control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
I mean, yeah, this is more sandboxy. You can do a lot of different things. And, you know, let's think of Red Dead Redemption, you know, a huge sandboxy world. If I was playing Red Dead Redemption with you, Paul, and our only goal in the game was to treat it like GoldenEye, where we were just trying to kill each other, that's horrible, right? We'd be searching for each other for hours before we find each other, right? And, you know, it's just not, it's not the right thing. It's, you can't have a knife fight in a phone booth when you have a huge sandbox world. So it's kind of a different thing. But once again, I like this game. I like this game, and I did not think that I could like a game that is very multiplayer solitaire.
Same.
This is very multiplayer solitaire. I think it's because when you're doing a multiplayer solitaire game, what you're essentially doing is you're each playing your own puzzle, and then you're comparing puzzles at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. And there are small interactions that alter what you're doing, but you're still putting together a puzzle. I think it's just that Fields of Arle is such a good puzzle. It is, and
it is, and you know, it's also a lovely game. Let's, you know, we don't often just sit and say this is a lovely game, but this is a lovely game. Like I'm not talking about the art. The art is actually also lovely. Although I wish I had slightly better fonts. I'll be honest. But you know, when you sit there and you've got your farm board and you are placing your things down in your fields or whatever, it comes to life, and you have got these adorable little animeeples, and you can sort of also just enjoy this game just as a pure exercise of building a farm, and it feels like you're building a farm, which is also important too. Like you know, you talk when you get your little animals, your horses. People wind up talking to their animals, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Horse, I have to like hook you up to a wagon now," or "Oh, they're gonna have babies now," or like you wind up like talking affectionately about your farm, or in my case, it'll be like, "Oh, this is a miserable farm with like 3 flax fields that are sad and whatever." But there's actually something really nice about creating this little world right in front of you. Like it sort of leans into that aspect of Agricola. And even though there is feed your people, it's kind of funny that there is sort of a nominal, pretty much like at the end of every round, you have to pay 3 food. And on alternating rounds, you have to also pay 2 peat. It's like, whatever. Food is so easy. Let me tell you something. Last night, I was scraping by for that food. And I'm like, how is it? Like some games, you're just like flush with the food. And then I've created this weird engine where I'm not flush with the food. And that again speaks to what's really interesting about the game is that there are so many avenues in this game. There are so many. And just when you think you figured it out, you don't. You have spaces on the game board that can go completely unused by everyone. And on other games, you say, why did they even design this space? But here, it goes unused in one game, and then another game, it's like I'm there every single round.
Yep.
And it's bizarre, but it's really cool how that works.
I think we highly recommend that you check it out, especially if you, and let's realize that this fits a niche. This is a 2-player game that is great and deep and interesting and is not mean and it's not cutthroat, but it is still very engaging and very competitive. That's a slot. That's a slot that we don't have a lot of games for.
Slot.
I feel like that's we get requests for games to play with couples.
Yes.
That one member does not enjoy like harsh conflict. This fits that to a T.
Yes.
I think.
I think this is actually a perfect game for a couple. And sorry, I'm going to talk right over you, Paul. I'm sorry.
No, you do that. You go. I'm the sidekick.
Excuse me, Robin.
You've already pretty much gotten me to spend $60 on a game today. So, but basically, I think it's the reason why I say it's perfect for a couple is not just because it's 2 players, but this is a game that rewards multiple plays. And I feel like people if you do play this game, just know that the first time you're not going to understand why you need any of the things you're doing. Just start pulling levers. This is a pull levers and enjoy the fun of pulling levers, of just playing around, because this is a game that wants you to play around. But also know, by the way, this is really, really important. This game is a table hog. Like, it's a 2-player game, and you would be shocked by how much space this game takes up. It is enormous. Like, it is. You cannot just play this on like a little card table or a bistro table. This is an enormous game with like a lot of components. It takes a long time to set up. Definitely make sure you get some sort of organizer or some Plano boxes. It is huge. And when you add the expansion, it gets even bigger. So just know that if you are planning a date night around this. But I say it's a totally fascinating game. And also just know this, that the game comes with really good player aids. And also the rule book is really good. And the reason why I mentioned that is if you see everything and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do? The game, there's like an entire page, I believe, on the back of the rule book, but maybe it's on the player aid that's like, so you have hides. What do you do with hides? Well, you can use them here or here. Oh, you've got wood. You can use them here or here. Oh, it shows you what you can do with everything. And my tip is, if ever you're lost, just look over to the buildings and find a building that looks like a cool building that you want to build, and then work backwards to how you want to get those resources to build it. And then that will just sort of send you on your journey.
Indeed. That was Fields of Arle 2014.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.